Already, so it is week 13 of the NFL season. It is flying by. We have 2 more weeks until the playoffs start for most people out there. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there who celebrates Thanksgiving, which hopefully is the majority of people. For you today, I have my week 13 waiver wire additions for the QB, running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions. Without further ado, we're going to hop right into the QB spot. QB1 for me on this week, it is Jacoby Brissett. Every single week since Kyler Murray has been out, Jacoby Brissett has been out there decently balling to absolutely balling every single week, like I already said. Doesn't matter who the wide receivers are. Doesn't matter if it's Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson. Trey McBride is pretty consistent. He is going out there and getting it done. The defense isn't that great, so they're having to score points. I do think when Trey Benson comes back, his play will be elevated even more because the running game will be more consistent. They can get away from Bam Knight. It can be a better and more efficient running back. I think it makes it where Jacoby Brissett is more lethal, more dominant. He has been viable in every size league format, including 8-man leagues. If you do not have a quarterback that is producing over, let's say, 19 to 20 points per week, Jacoby Brissett is for you. 8-man, 10-man, 12-man, and larger leagues. If he's available and you don't love your QB option, I think Jacoby Brissett is a great opportunity at the QB spot, especially this late in the season. The next quarterback, who's probably just a 1-week rental, unfortunately, it is Jameis Winston. It could set up, though, now with the Giants being mathematically eliminated, that Jameis ends up starting more games and they don't rush Jackson Dart back at all. It wouldn't shock me if he missed 1, 2, maybe even 3 more weeks as they just try and take their time and not try and mess up their future franchise quarterback. I do think Jameis Winston has the ability, especially against worse defenses, to get it done. We saw how great he looked in week 12. He didn't look too bad in week 11, but he looked absolutely dominant again in week 12. I just think that Jameis, if you can get him for 1 week, 2 weeks, depending on your league size, especially for superflex formats, he's a pretty decent option to pick up in week 13. Hopping over to the running back position because I only had 2 QBs. The first running back is Kenneth Gainwell. Jalen Warren did end up playing again, obviously, but Kenneth Gainwell still holds some value. The Steelers want to run the football, play good defense. Aaron Rodgers isn't playing, which means that the running backs are going to be utilized even more. There's a chance that any given week Jalen Warren could miss. There's a chance that any given week Kenneth Gainwell could pop off in the weeks that he's out. I do think if you're in larger leagues, 12-man and larger, I do think Kenneth Gainwell is absolutely somebody that you should pick up, have on your bench, be sitting him. You may never get to play him again, but if we do see Jalen Warren go down or miss some games, miss some playing time, then I think he's very, very viable in those larger league formats. The next running back who may be viable in 10 and 12-man leagues, maybe 8, but probably just 10 and 12-man leagues and larger, it is Devin Neal for the Saints. I know that Alvin Kamara is not going to be like on IR, but he should miss the next handful of weeks. And when you're in larger leagues, you're looking for starting running backs, even if they are on bottom 10 scoring offenses. I do think Devin Neal has had little flashes throughout the season. I think when they end up playing an easier run defense, look for some of those positive game scripts for the Saints. I think is a potential to be a low-end RB2 on those given weeks, which is probably what you're looking for going into the playoffs, especially if he has some play in the actual fantasy playoffs. Because if you're making it to the playoffs, one of your other running backs gets injured, maybe you had Alvin Kamara and now you got to throw him on your IR or just have him out because who knows what's going to happen with him. Devin Neal, obviously not fantastic, but because of the injury, because, we'll see what he looks like in his first real start in week 13, he could pop off and he could be somebody who's viable in the back half of the season. The next running back, I talked about him last week, I'll talk about him again this week. It is Emmanuel Wilson for the Packers. If you picked him up last week and you watched my video, you feel great. If you started him, you feel even better. If we do see Josh Jacobs somehow miss another week or two, he's obviously a pretty much must start every single week because he's attached to a high-scoring Packers offense, attached to Jordan Love, and we know the Packers like to run the football, especially later on in the season. I do also think he's a decent enough handcuff because Josh Jacobs, now that he's had one injury, was kind of lagging throughout the season. It could linger on for the rest of the year, and he may miss another couple of weeks even when he comes back. That could set it up where he may be viable and he may be startable because if Josh Jacobs is out for the fantasy football playoffs, he could absolutely be a running back that you need to have depending on the matchups. I know they have a lot of divisional games coming up. Obviously, the Lions' run defense isn't anything to scoff at, but when it comes to the Bears, they're pretty bad at stopping the run. That could set up where if he's starting against the Bears, he could be viable in fantasy football, especially for the playoffs. So hopefully you watched the video last week, already picked him up, stashed him on your bench, and if you were even really smart, smarter than I was, you started him in week 12. The last running back that we might consider picking up, if he's still available in your league, especially 10-man, 12-man leagues, it is Sean Tucker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Obviously, he didn't look great in week 12 against the Rams, but realistically, no running back has looked that great against this Rams defense over the last handful of weeks. I do think that Bucky Irving's injury is starting to become concerning. It's taking way too long for him to come back. Obviously, Rachaad White's not that explosive. They're trying to get Sean Tucker more and more touches and more run. He's involved in the passing game. I do believe that if Bucky Irving misses going into the fantasy playoffs, he may not return until the actual playoffs. If that happens, again, you're getting a starting running back on a top 10-ish scoring football team in the NFL. They've been kind of struggling the past couple of weeks, but I do think that Sean Tucker provides you enough upside that if he's startable, meaning Bucky Irving is not playing in the playoffs, you could feel comfortable depending on the matchup, especially if he's playing against the Panthers, the Saints, or somebody in their division who's not that great at stopping the run. Alrighty, so for the wide receivers, swapping over there, talked about him last week, week four. It is Christian Watson. Christian Watson will end up being the number 2 at worst, number 1 at best target earner for this Packers football team. It will be him and Romeo Doubs competing for targets with Jordan Love. This doesn't mean that we can rule out Matthew Golden starting to pop off. Doesn't mean that we can rule Jaden Reed out, like coming back obviously and playing really well. What it does mean though is that until one of those things happens and it looks good, it does mean that he's going to be a viable wide receiver, probably a wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4. He's going to have his up and down weeks, but I do think because it's attached to Jordan Love, Matt LaFleur, this high passing attack, and there's really nobody else out there aside from these two guys on a week-over-week basis, I do think Christian Watson is really viable, especially for 10 and 12-man leagues. The next wide receiver to just watch a little bit. It is John Mechie for the Jets. Jets offense, not great. The team as a whole is not that great. But what I do know is Tyrod Taylor elevated this offense. Maybe not like crazy, but it was dramatically better than with Justin Fields, especially the passing game. If we do see Garrett Wilson continue to miss games, it really doesn't matter if he misses or doesn't miss it. But if he misses, it is going to set up where John Mechie is probably like a wide receiver 4 in fantasy football. There's a reality where if he gets more and more involved, he could end up being a middle of the road to a low end wide receiver 3 going into fantasy football playoffs. This means he could actually have viability as a flex play in the playoffs depending on the injury situations you're having and also depending on how deep your wide receiver room is. Having watched John Mechie quite a bit with the Texans, I know he does have the juice. He may not be the best wide receiver, but he does have the juice. He's looked pretty good through the past couple of weeks for the Jets, and if Tyrod Taylor is going to keep on being the quarterback for the Jets, I think John Mechie has some play in the fantasy football playoffs. The next wide receiver I've talked about the entire season, and I talked about him last week obviously as well. It is Darnell Mooney. He's probably not available in your league if you're in 10-man and larger leagues. Maybe in 10-man, maybe 8-man definitely. If he's available in your 8-man league, you should be rostering Darnell Mooney. He is way more viable with Kirk Cousins. We saw that with Drake London out. We're going to see more weeks like that with Drake London out. Even if Drake London's in, Darnell Mooney last season was a wide receiver 3 with Kirk Cousins. He has crazy high upside going into the fantasy playoffs. He's been injured the majority of the season, so he might still be out there on your waiver wire. If he is in any league size format, which he probably won't be in like 10 and 12 man leagues, but if he's available in any of them, you should be rostering Darnell Mooney and starting him every single week that Drake London misses. And especially in pass game scripts, high scoring games, he is absolutely viable as a wide receiver 3, which is fantastic because he should still be out there again in some leagues going into the fantasy football playoffs and actually could contribute to you winning your championship in 2025. The next wide receiver to consider is Jaden Higgins for the Texans. He didn't look as great in week 12, but the passing offense with Davis Mills didn't look that great for the Texans either in week 12. I do believe that it'll end up being Nico Collins and Jaden Higgins as the 1 and the 2, and we'll start to see Dalton Schultz fall more and more away from this passing attack as Higgins emerges. Obviously, Nico Collins is going to draw a lot of double coverage, a lot of bracket coverage. That should leave Jaden Higgins on more favorable one-on-one matchups, and he could be viable depending on how much play he gets. And if CJ Stroud comes back and can look better than Davis Mills, which I don't know if it's going to happen, but if he comes back and can play better, play up to his standard, if he can get somewhere closer to where he was at, like in his rookie season, I do think Jaden Higgins, obviously Nico Collins is his own beast, but Jaden Higgins could be viable, especially in 10 and possibly, obviously, 12-man leagues as well. I don't know how viable he's going to be, only because I don't know how many targets he's going to get week over week. I am hoping he can take a step up this coming week. Probably somebody you could stash on your bench right now and hope that he can be getting it going more and more going into week 15. The last wide receiver I'm going to talk about him for like 4 or 5 weeks. He's still available in way too many leagues. It's like 60-some% of sleeper leagues. He's still available. It is something DK. I can't say his first name. He's playing for the Titans. Titans offense is horrible. Cam Ward is pretty horrible. The Titans team is pretty horrible, but DK is fantastic. The dude is a speedster. He may not be the best wide receiver, obviously, for like a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 in the NFL, but the dude has the juice, he has the speed. If you're playing in a league where punt returns or kick returns for a touchdown count for points, DK has to be rostered in every league size format because he is getting kick returns and I guess it's more like punt returns, 4 touchdowns this season. You got another one in week 12. He absolutely looks fantastic. I think he had another touchdown through the air, if I'm not mistaken. DK is good. I can't think it's like Jamari, DK for the Titans, somebody in the roster. If he's available, which he should be in pretty much every league out there, maybe not some like really competitive 12-man leagues or larger leagues, but if he's available, you should feel comfortable picking him up. The better Cam Ward looks, the better he's going to look. And going into the back half of the season, they're not really playing for anything, obviously, at this point in time. So it should set it up where the Titans have some viability with their wide receivers, primarily DK going into the fantasy playoffs where he may be viable enough for you to start, depending on the matchup. All right, transitioning over to tight ends, I'm going to run through all 3 of these really fast. And I apologize, I've done this whole video pretty fast, but these 3 guys I've talked about way too many times this season. It is Cade Otton for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Theo Johnson for the Giants, and Mason Taylor for the Jets. Obviously, none of them are like elite tight ends. We do know that Cade Otton is going to be involved with this high-scoring Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. He's going to be the number 2 or number 3 target earner every single week for them, which means Baker Mayfield is going to get the ball to him a lot. He's going to have red zone and touchdown equity on this football team, which means he should be able to score a touchdown any given week. Doesn't mean he will, but he should have the ability to. Theo Johnson is playing for the Giants. He has to get involved because there's nobody else aside from really Wandell and Darius Slayton out there, which means Theo Johnson, just like Cade Otton, is going to be the number 2 at best and number 3 at worst option on his football team. Has touchdown equity on this team. Again, you want tight ends at this point in time in larger leagues, 10 and 12-man leagues. If your tight end's not performing, you want guys who can get touchdowns every single week. Doesn't mean they will, and who are going to get targets every single week. All 3 of these guys fit the bill. The third one is Mason Taylor for the Jets. He's going to end up being the number 2 or number 3 target earner for his football team. He's a little bit more variable, so I do like the other 2 tight ends more. They're a little bit more heavily rostered than he is, but if you are really desperate for a tight end and you need some help, I think Mason Taylor is a good option. Realistically, though, Cade Otton and Theo Johnson are probably your best bets at this point in time of the season, and they're not overly crazy rostered, so they should be out there in a lot of league sizes. That is my waiver wire pickups for week 13 at all 4 positions. Hopefully this video helps you just a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. If you play with DST and you are streaming every week, you don't have a set it and forget it defense, I will have that video down here, up here, somewhere on the screen when that video posts. So go check that out if you feel so inclined. Hopefully I'll see you guys again. No, hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. And until then, y'all have a blessed day. Bye.